During the mid-1940s, the French Air Ministry had a couple of different requirements posted for new aircraft, including a single-seat day fighter. There were several submissions, including what would eventually become the MS-406 and the MB-150 series. The MB-150 was found to be pretty deficient in most areas, and in fact, the first prototype couldn't even get off the ground. Development continued anyway to try and improve the design. The MB-151 ended up being an updated iteration with a better engine, refinements to the cooling system, and structural changes to try and bring the cost down. Only a small production run was completed, and the planes were found almost completely unsuited for combat duties, and the performance was well below projected goals. A few further upgraded models were built, but none of them ever really reached competitive performance against other single-engine fighters of the day. Still, the French needed any fighters they could get, so they were all pressed into service as World War II started, despite being outclassed by enemy aircraft. After the French armistice, nobody really seemed to know what to do with the leftover MB-150 series planes, and they kind of bounced around between different operators, mostly being used in secondary roles, with the exception of Greece, which actually used the plane as a frontline fighter and found a small amount of success with it. What we get in War Thunder is the MB-151C1, a premium fighter and rank 1 of the French air tree at battle rating 1.7. This is the entry-level reward from the Winter Tales event at the end of 2024. The plane's armament is a simple set of 4 7.5mm machine guns with 300 rounds per gun. The guns this plane gets have a good rate of fire, but the hitting power is quite low. For ammo belts, you get a typical low-tier selection, and none of them really have much stopping power. The tracer belt is the best at setting fires, and can be used against large bombers if nobody's trying to steal the kill, but the universal belt is probably your best choice for most circumstances. The flight performance of the MB-151 is, unfortunately, accurate to its historical figures. I rarely ever say this, but it just kinda sucks. The rate of climb is barely average even for rank 1, its top speed isn't impressive, and its agility in a dogfight is just bad. It doesn't roll well, nor does it pull too hard into turns. Given that a lot of the other planes in rank 1 are excellent close-in dogfighters, if you end up getting defensive in this plane, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get somebody off your tail, and you're going to be relying on pilot error from the opponent rather than your own plane's performance in order to save you. In arcade battles, the situation is actually even worse, since the flight model buffs help other planes more than they help the MB-151. So even with the easier handling, it still just doesn't really compete very well. Actually taking this plane out in air battles can prove quite challenging. Almost everything you face has at least one performance advantage that they can use against you. Biplanes will slowly chop you up if they get within 1 kilometer because you can't build enough airspeed to escape since the acceleration is so bad, and they'll outmaneuver you with zero effort even if you try and shake them off. Monoplane fighters are all either faster or can also outmaneuver you. Some can do both. Even boom and zoom tactics don't really work very well since you can't really gain an altitude or energy advantage most of the time, and the firepower is just so low that it's incredibly hard to take out an opponent in one burst unless you get lucky with a pilot snipe. Twin-engine planes and large bombers are really the only targets you can go after without being completely defensive after one maneuver, but it takes an enormous quantity of hits to bring them down since, again, the firepower is just really low in this plane. Another critical weakness, and really this is the big one, is that the engine is incredibly fragile. Even a short burst from a bomber's gun turret, or a couple of stray hits and a head-on from some suicide biplane, will usually cripple your engine and eventually lead to a crash. I tell you with no shame that maybe I was just totally off my game having a bad streak or something, but I had a harder time making this plane work than anything I've flown in the game probably in all of 2024. Your only real hope to be genuinely successful in this thing is to try and carefully engineer situations with positioning tactics where you can side climb off to the side and try to get people into energy traps, or maybe third-party someone who's distracted in a furball. Regardless, it's not an easy plane to use. Visually, the 3D model is fairly well done, and the interwar French camo looks nice. The gentle slope behind the cockpit honestly makes this look more like a somewhat modern civil aviation plane than anything else, but it's not an eyesore. Landing the MB-151 is actually really easy. It won't nose over when you lock up the brakes, and it's got good landing flaps. You can drop gear at about 300 kilometers an hour and flaps at around 270. Inside the cockpit, the visibility is surprisingly good for a low-tier prop fighter, and the gun sight is actually pretty easy to aim with. I had a better time flying this in VR than up on the monitor. To close out on the MB-151C1. This plane gets premium bonuses. However, its guns are quite wimpy, it doesn't maneuver well, it's a bit underpowered, and its engine is made out of aluminum foil. The final verdict on the MB-151 is that this plane is basically going to end up as lineup filler. It might find a niche use if you are just starting off the French tree and need something to fly in rank 1 that isn't a reserve biplane, but past that, you probably won't get a lot of use out of it. As always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, check out this other one.